stolen.
Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Thomas H. Johnson volume, and we are to poem now 613, They Shut Me Up in Prose. One of Emily's most important poems. So many people keep coming back to this poem over and over again to appreciate what it is that she will say in her defiant Promethean voice. We are back to poem 486. You guys will maybe remember when we played this game. I was the slightest in the house. I took the smallest room. At night my little lamp and book and one geranium so stationed I could catch the mint that never ceased to fall, and just my basket. Let me think. I'm sure that this was all. I never spoke unless addressed, and then 'twas brief and low. I could not bear to live aloud. The racket shamed me so, and if it had not been so far, and anyone I knew were going, I'd often thought how noteless I could die. Now, the scholar Priest has pointed out that in a letter to a niece, a young niece, when punished in a similar way as described here, Emily said, Maddie, quote, Maddie, no child could ever punish a Dickinson by shutting her up alone. So the idea that we're going to read here, I don't think, and scholars agree with me on this part, I don't think Emily was ever locked away in a closet a la Harry Potter under the stairs. And yet, I think Emily at times felt shut up, as we will see in our study here in a moment. First, let's get our assumptions out of the way. I'm hopeful that you've already been working with us at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments where we commented on Emily as child and the way that she was raised. And then as well, I'm hopeful that you've worked through the preceding 612 poems. We just finished with 612. It would have started in that. That poem has often been read in conjunction or contiguity with this poem. It is, as one scholar has called it, a defiant, triumphant poem. And it is true that Emily seems to see herself often as the outsider, the Promethean. This is how she says it. They shut me up in prose, as when a little girl they put me in the closet because they liked me. Still, could themselves have peeped and seen my brain go round, they might as wise have lodged a bird for treason in the pound. Himself has but to will, and easy as a star, abolish his captivity, and laugh, no more have I. Now, the fact that this poem ends with Emily suggesting that out of captivity of a kind she can laugh, tells us that this is in some ways Emily's Emancipation Proclamation. This is her declaration of independence. We've seen a number of other poems that will share this kind of Promethean tenor or voice. The first obvious question is, who is the they? They shut me up in prose. Like, they who? Some have read it as her parents, some have read it as her community of Amherst, some have of course read it as her spiritual or religious community. Some have read it as Sam Boyles and the Republican, the Independent Republican, that newspaper that he was a part of, that didn't want to publish her stuff. Whoever it was, notice she will say, they shut me up in prose. Now you'll remember when we did poem 220 that she said it this way. Could I then shut the door, lest my beseeching face at last rejected be of her? And you'll remember when we did 538, she said it this way. 'Tis true, they shut me in the cold, but then themselves were warm and could not know the feeling was, forget it, Lord, of them. Let not my witness hinder them in heavenly esteem. No paradise could be conferred through their beloved blame. The harm they did was short, and since myself who bore it do forgive them, even as myself, or else forgive not me. This idea of being shut up, this idea of being excluded in some way. But notice it is shut up in prose. The symbolism for some kind of oppression. What kind of oppression? Well, again, we'll have to speculate. And then she goes to the simile that takes her back to being a little girl. You'll remember a little girl from 425, 454, and 576. Of course, in the previous poem, it was to get my little being out. Again, little used in 172 of Emily's poems to emphasize her fragility. They put her in the closet. Now, again, the closet here is, I'm guessing, symbolic. We don't have any reason to believe that Emily is a little girl. To shut her up, they put her inside of a closet. But symbolically, very possible, her household duties and the like, because they like me still. Notice still in quotation marks. And then the next word of the poem is the word still with an exclamation point. I think the word still is an important word for Emily. She will play with this word in 95 of her poems. I have commented to you guys already. I think T.S. Eliot learned a lot from his readings of the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Of course, in East Coker, you'll remember that he said, "All men ought to be explorers." What does he say? We must be what? Still and still moving into another intensity. That idea of stillness is so profound because it can at the same time mean to be unmovable, still, but it can also mean I am still in this room, some sense of duration. The word still can play with both sides of it. She says, they wanted me, or they liked me, still. And then notice, still, exclamation point, and here of course is her Promethean voice coming out. Could themselves have peeped and seen my brain. By the way, she uses the word peeped in only one of her poems that it's here. Could they have peeped and seen my brain? When we get to 1046, it will be, I've dropped my brain. She'll use brain in 21 of her poems. Could have seen my brain, dash, go round, dash. You'll remember this go round from 214. I taste a liquor never brewed, from tankard scooped in pearl. Not all the vats upon the Rhine yield such an alcohol. Inebriate of air am I, and dubishy of dew, reeling through endless summer days from ends of molten blue. When landlords turn the drunken bee out of the foxglove's door, when butterflies renounce their drams, I shall but drink the more, till seraphs swing their snowy hats and saints to windows run, to see the little tippler leaning against the sun. In other words, this idea of freedom to go round. They might as wise have lodged a bird for treason in the pound. Now, Emily is being very careful in her choosing of this word treason. I think it's significant. In other words, I think there's a sense of religious blasphemy that's at play here. Treason, going against the order. She is the iconoclast. She said, you might as well have tried to put a bird inside of a pound to keep them there. Why? Because the bird himself has but to will desire. And easy as a star abolishes captivity. I think the word captivity here is the key word. We can't help but think of course, Hamlet when he says it to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, there is nothing good or ill, but thinking makes it so. And she says, after my freedom from the closet, whatever that is, laugh, she says, dash, no more have I, dash. Now, you'll remember when we did 298, I'm hopeful that you'll remember, she says, alone I cannot be, for hosts do visit me, recordless company who baffle key. They have no robes, nor names, nor almanacs, nor climes, but general homes like knowns. Their coming may be known by couriers within. Their going is not, and they're never gone. And when we get to 657, we're going to come back to this poem again. We'll remind ourselves when we do 657. This is how she says it. I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors, of chambers as the cedars impregnable of eye, for an everlasting roof the gamblers of the sky, of visitors the fairest, for occupation this, the spreading wide my narrow hands to gather paradise. All right, what are we going to say about this poem at 2A in Themes and Messages? I think our argument is the poetic genius, it can't be imprisoned. It has to find its way out. At 2B, well, obviously, the imagery of the bird is significant. At 3A, I think that Czesław Miłosz's treatise on poetry will say that, what does he say? One great poem can carry more than, what does he say, a wagon load of prose? I may be borrowing from this. But I can't help but read this poem and think of the great Maya Angelou and her classic poem, Caged Bird, and of course her autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. We commented so regularly on a beloved text in room 303. You'll remember this poem, Caged Bird. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare's scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. I think it's clear as well that Emily is thinking of freedom. By the way, note the use of the word still that one time in this poem as well. It'd be interesting to know if Maya Angelou maybe was channeling some of the ideas here in 613. Finally, to own a poem like this, when was the time that you felt trapped in the closet, that you needed to be released and to escape, and you were able to laugh because there was no way they were ever going to keep you down? Thank you.